Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to another HyperDocs live show. We are so excited to bring some more good conversation to you and with you. We have a very special friend of ours joining today. And without further ado, I would like to invite our good friend Rocky into the chat today. Hi, Rocky.
Hi there.
So for those of you that haven't had a chance to meet Rocky yet, he is a 7th grade history teacher. He is a dad, a husband, musician, a surfer, gardener, awesome on the barbecue. I mean, all around cool guy. That's what I'm going to name you today. And so Rocky is also one of the first HyperDoc creators that we connected with years ago. Rocky, it's been like over 5 years or something. I'm trying to remember how long. But
it might even been longer than that.
I know, because
it's been a while.
The book came out in 2016, and there he is, page 11. And we have just been so blessed to kind of follow you and your journey over the years. You want to tell us a little bit about what you currently teach?
Yeah, currently I am at Mesa Middle School in Napomo. It's actually in Rio Grande, but I call it Napomo because it's got all Napomo kids for the most part. I teach 7th grade world history, social studies, and I teach a digital media arts class as well. So, and I coach volleyball, boys varsity at Napomo High School, and a bunch of other stuff.
A bunch of other stuff. Exactly. That's why I have to round out your title to just like all around cool guy, like all around hobby guy, which has actually been instrumental, I think, for me in thinking about who might we want to chat with next. Because as we're kind of in this in-between stage where we wrap up the craziness of this year and look to the summer, I feel like tapping into the parts of who we are like is really important, I think, for kids, for us as like exhausted teachers. So making sure that we save time for ourselves and developing hobbies and passion projects and all that kind of stuff is like a really smart, like survival skill. But I follow all of the things that you do. If you're not following Rocky, you're going to have to follow him on Instagram just to kind of get a sense of like his hobbies, and you're always sharing your music there. And so there's a lot. You are just doing a lot, my friend. So I was wondering if we can just kind of start out today and hearing a little bit about your students. Tell us about maybe what that shift has been like for them. I know that you find so many different ways to connect with them. Like even just, again, going back to your Instagram post, there was one the other day where you're like out in the garden, checking on your garden. You're like, hey kids, I'm out in the garden. How are you? So can you just talk to us a little bit about how it's going for your students? And
yeah, it's funny. I'm looking at myself because you have to look at yourself when you do this, which is weird. And it seems like I'm staring off to the side because that's where when I look at you, my camera's on the side. So it's like I'm staring off, like doing something else. So
awkward.
I'll try to look at the camera sometimes and not look like I'm reading some other thing. But yeah, connecting with the students, obviously this was a weird time for everybody. I think those of us who had an online presence already or were doing blended learning models, it was a little bit easy is a bad term, but it was a little bit more comfortable, right, to communicate online via email or other web-based things, and where other teachers may not have had those types of things or not use them as readily was a little bit difficult. For me, I had already been using Google Classroom for years. The first week that we had off, we could communicate with kids and send emails about things, but it was really that first week, I think a lot of school districts did this. It was like, hey, we need to prep, get all this stuff ready to go. So, some of the things that I did was like, well, I can set up the Instagram account is new, that school one. So I know a lot of kids are on Instagram. So I'll set up an Instagram account just as a teacher account. I have my own personal account. And so kids can connect that way because I knew that, so for some kids, it's really, really hard to check Google Classroom. Even though it's a lot easier to navigate than things like Snapchat or TikTok or stuff like that, but it's hard. I don't know how to open a Google Classroom assignment. So I figured, let me go where they are. I wasn't going to do TikTok because I'm way too old for that. Snapchat, I still can't even figure out. So I skipped that. So I'm like, Instagram is a good place for me to get some messages to the kids and show some fun stuff. So it's kind of it's a way to I'm trying to think of a good term. It's a way to get to them on their level. I guess that's a good way to put it, where I can, show some fun stuff and show my kids. My kids go to school in the same district, and show some things like that. And then every now and then say, hey, remember there's an assignment due on Friday at this time. So kind of finding a balance there. Whereas Google Classroom is more, that's my classroom. This is when the assignment's up, and this is when it's due. The first real contact on distance learning with kids, I got pretty good participation because I was just doing kind of fun stuff. And I was, I take a video around this room I'm in. It's a mess. I'm not going to show it to you now. It was clean then. And one of the first assignments was, hey, what are 5 interesting things that you see in this short little minute video? And I got almost 100% of my kids to respond, which was great. And so that first week when I was just doing check-ins and fun stuff, there was a big response. That has kind of waned, and I think that's been a little bit probably for a lot of people that I've talked to, where I had pretty big participation. But then when it was, okay, this is more than just 2 weeks. Okay, it's after spring break. When you start putting out, as opposed to, hey, here's a fun video, watch this and answer questions. Can you write a paragraph response? Well, then obviously some kids are going to choose to not do that. So I still have pretty good contact, I feel, and I feel like I have good contact with the kids. But I have to get over, and I think a lot of teachers do, when I look in my grade book and go, oh, so-and-so is missing something. This is distance learning. It's not even distance learning as if the kids chose to do it. This is, I guess, like triage, or this is like hey, this is just something that we have to do. So it's just a different mindset for everybody. So I have had a little bit of, at least on Google Classroom, not as, depending on the assignment, not as much response, but then I do get those responses, and it's nice to see, all right, they are at least on Instagram, and they'll, I see some of those kids will comment on something on Instagram and then go back and finish their work.
Well, you said something right away. You said, meet the kids where they are. So you're like out there finding them. You're on Insta, you're on TikTok, you're on Snap. Okay, there you're out there. So I just have to go to where you are. And I feel like and not everyone's comfortable doing that, but I feel like you're basically saying, like, I can go to your level because I care enough about you, and let's have some fun. And I'm laughing too, because just in a quick scan of your Instagram feed, like the one day you're out there jamming for the kids, just playing some music, you've got some comments that are like, who knew Lo got skills on the chords? And then another student says, you should make a TikTok account. So
yeah,
like,
that's not gonna happen.
I know, but they're feeling it, and that's the kind of connection that I think they need, that we need. It's like, it's not that hard to connect with students. Just be yourself. And I think you do that so organically. It just feels really authentic, unplanned, spontaneous,
For years, I was at, in Templeton Unified School District, and now I'm back. I actually live now in the town where I teach, which is kind of nice. I was doing a long commute every day, not that long, especially in terms that in the Central Coast, you drive 35 miles, it takes you 45 minutes. If you're in the Bay Area or LA, 35 miles might take you 2.5, 3 hours. So it wasn't that long of a commute, but in Central Coast, that's like a nightmare commute for anybody. But now I'm working, and the school that I work at now is in a somewhat rural community. And so some kids that legitimately don't have internet. The house I'm in now, when we first moved into the house 10 years ago, I couldn't even use my cell phone. I couldn't have done this because there wasn't cell phone towers. So there's that hurdle to jump with some of the kids, that even if they can afford the internet, or we can provide it for them, or Chromebooks, they might live in a spot that there's just none. We have kids that live out in the hills and stuff like that. My school's also, I believe it's 65, 70% socioeconomically disadvantaged, and about 40% EL, I believe. I could be off on those numbers. So, so it's just finding creative ways with, I think my school, we got Chromebooks out to just about everybody, except for the only people that didn't get Chromebooks they chose to be on packets for whatever reason. And that was probably because they had no internet access. There's no way they could have gotten it. So their only choice was to go pick up weekly packets, and we're passing those out with, we've been providing lunches and meals every single day throughout the district for kids.
I think that's awesome. And I mean, just goes back to what you were saying before too, like finding kids where they're at. You need a packet, we're gonna get you a packet. Like, we're gonna find a way for this to work for you. I think we're at a critical point right now where everyone's really like reflecting on the last couple months and then kind of looking ahead on what do we want to keep? Like what systems or what strategies were effective? And then what can we let go of and what is going to be sustainable? I think is the big question right now too, looking ahead. And I know there's a lot of anxiety that teachers are feeling around that. And so finding ways to keep our kids connected is going to be, I think, a big question. Like, how do we keep that motivation up? And maybe it's a mix of what you're saying, like bring in like a fun and then take a break and then get to the heavy content and then take it, or how do you intermix the two so that it feels natural and sustainable? Because if we're in the same scenario in a couple of months, how are you going to connect with your, packet students that don't have Wi-Fi and aren't able to necessarily engage with your content in the really creative ways that you're producing that content?
Well, yeah, that will be a big, the equity issues will be a huge hurdle, because even if kids have Wi-Fi, if their parents are working, I know that I have kids that have to watch their kids, or their little brothers and sisters while their parents are at work. And then when their parents come home from work, do they want to sit in front of a computer with their kids for 6 hours and make sure that all their schoolwork's done? Sometimes you got to realize, yeah, there's more important things than my social studies class. But that will be difficult if we are doing this, next year, distance learning. And right now, our district adopted a credit, no credit policy, which makes it attainable for all kids to get credit. You put in your work, you do your stuff, and you can earn credit. And we did that to make sure that we weren't harming any kids. We weren't, it wasn't, kids weren't getting more stressed. Like, oh my God, I gotta. Kids could choose in high school if they wanted to earn grades. So there was that, we had that end too, like, oh no, wait, I need to get my grades. It's like, okay, you can do the work for grades if you choose to, but if you choose to, and there's no penalty, for valedictorian or for any other type of awards, if you were to choose to go credit, no credit right now in high school, you're still, in the run for all those types of accolades. But if it's next year and it all shifts to, well, now it has to look more like, your in real life grades, where I'm actually, all right, that assignment is due and I'm going to really put my all into grading this and give you that feedback. And then that translates to, that's going to be the difficult part, because what do you say to that kid who comes to you and says, well, I can't do this because I'm watching a 2-year-old all day?
Well, Rocky,
and how,
yeah. It's super important, I think, for teachers to remember not only are we struggling with all the shifts, as adults, but we tend to be more equipped with, how to handle this kind of thing. And we see maybe the temporariness of it, whereas for students, they might not have the ability to grasp onto this and where are we going with it. But I think getting back kind of to your point of like, we have to adapt. Like, what are we going to do as that child's teacher to adapt? And maybe it's getting to the point. Like, I feel like I've had some great conversations with teachers lately about what can you let go of? Like, what in your curriculum can you let go of? And what is absolutely essential to keep in there? Because if students aren't able to invest their time because they're taking care of other family members or there's other things going on in the home, they don't have time to, work on things that don't feel as, meaningful or effective or essential. So,
well, it could also be like, my kids have an administrator parent, and then they have me as a parent. So they have 2 people at home that are educators that it's harder to educate my own kids at home than it is to educate the 130 kids
raise
I
your
have
hand
at
if you
school.
feel the same way. Teacher friends.
Yeah. So even with 2 professional educators in the household, I have one, my daughter, she's great and she does everything great. And my son's super smart, but he's like me, and he's, well, why? Why do I have to do? Why should I? I was like, his teacher can tell him why, and he'll do it in an instant and do it great. But dad asks him, tries to tell him why, and then I just get why again and why. So sometimes it's not even the issue of they don't have devices, or it's not always the issue of the terrible home life or things like that. Sometimes it's just, it's not the same. It's a difficult thing. I taught way back when I taught independent study, and it's, I wish I had all these tools back then, but it's just it's a different thing. It's just. sometimes the issues aren't these big headline type issues. Sometimes they're smaller issues that are going to affect the way that that kid learns and completes their stuff.
Absolutely. And so I know that you've been working on some new creative projects to keep yourself kind of going during this. Like, like, okay, my own energy is starting to dip. How do I bring myself back? You've been working on podcasts, and I know you always have like some new creative endeavors that you're working on. So I'm wondering if you might be able to share some of those with us, especially because you've been creating HyperDocs for a long time already. And so I imagine the shift to like remote learning and distance learning wasn't a big shift necessarily for you, but I'm wondering, what are some of the ways that you're kind of keeping yourself like motivated, and how is that helping with the kids?
My biggest creative endeavor is trying to make sure my kids get enough physical activity every day. They're both athletes and they're both in sports. And obviously all of that's been taken away right now. And so it's really, this is the biggest struggle I've had with my own kids of get outside, go. And when I can't do it, right, when I have to be on calls and on meetings and posting things, and they're done with their work, go play basketball, I don't want to. Go play baseball there, I don't want to. So that's been my creative type, like how to get them and explain to them, hey, you would have had 2 hours of baseball practice, PE, playing with your friends, so you'd have 4 or 5 hours of activity just built into your day, and now it's down to an hour or two. So I know that it might not be the answer, but that is one of my creative things I'm trying to figure out with them. Get out and do stuff, practicing guitar more often. I don't know, getting outside and being able to walk or run or work out in between. When you're at school and you take the 35-minute lunch break, sometimes you're kind of exhausted, so you just sit there and you eat. And here I've been sitting on a Chromebook or sitting on my computer, and it's like, all right, it's lunchtime, I've done my emails, I've graded, I've been on since 7 a.m. to noon, and I can go out and run at lunch or stuff like that. Just for me, it's trying to be, I guess, active is the whole thing, and make sure I got my little step counter thing. And some mornings I'm teaching, you get tons of steps in, but I'll realize it's noon and I've gotten less than 1,000 steps, and I'm going, oh, half my day's been gone. So I need to get out and walk, take the dog. Our dog loves it because he gets 800 walks a day. But those are the big things that I've been doing. You mentioned the podcasts. I don't know if you want to start talking about like HyperDocs and how I've been using them.
Yeah, and our Facebook community and our Twitter community has just grown exponentially in the last, couple months because of this like emergency situation. And so we want to really speak to like the people that are new to this, but also some of us have been doing this for a long time. So if you can kind of, we want to hear about what you're doing and things that you're doing to like remix your own work.
I went through an arc, for people that don't know me, I was the first person in Templeton School District with a bank of Chromebooks in my classroom. And I went through the whole arc of, I'm going to do everything online, paperless, learn every single new tech thing, try every new tech thing. And I went through that for a while and then realized that's kind of not sustainable. And then you hit the pay ceiling if you try every new tech thing. And then you realize, well, this is cool, but how much does it really help me? I think Alice Keeler is somebody who said, things at, well, actually, we'll start with Lisa first. Lisa Heifel is the one that said, if you're going to use tech in the classroom, make sure it helps you out. If it's easier to go to the copy machine, go to the copy machine. Don't just use it. And that was one of these big epiphanies I had. And then same thing with Alice Keeler saying, hey, let the technology, if you can grade it, if you have technology like giving assessments online, as long as they're not constructed response, well, that tech's making my life easier because it's grading the test. I can upload it straight into Aries, and what took me an hour before takes me 10 minutes tops. And so I started listening to things like that going, oh yeah, I don't need to do everything new. And so I've been up the hill of trying everything new and down on the other side, and I'll try some stuff. But that's a long story to get into HyperDocs. So my HyperDocs have evolved a lot from the beginning. And the links I know that were shared have some older ones. My website, mrloguesroom.com, will have the newer versions of them. But I've always, and I don't know who coined this term, maybe I did it, but I've always looked at HyperDocs in 3 different ways. Either consumer HyperDocs, where you give out a HyperDoc and the kids consume it. It's got links to things. It's got things to read. Basically, it's like a hyper extension of a textbook, right? You're giving them information to digest and look at and take notes on and things like that. And then there are producer HyperDocs, which would be more of a HyperDoc that I would give out to a kid and have them read something and then answer something or do something like produce something through the HyperDoc for me. And then hybrids, which would be a combination of the two. Back in the early days, I had these things that people were always amazed by, and I dubbed them the magic text box or the magic text boxes. And people are like, well, how do you do that?
That's right.
And I'm like, it's just a text box with a different color.
Bring in the magic.
That was the biggest question I would always get. How did you? And I'm like, just draw a text box and change the color. I don't necessarily. I use more of a hybrid to consumer HyperDocs now, meaning I don't have kids take notes on the HyperDocs anymore for a couple reasons. One, if I'm going to grade them, it's really tough to go through all the slideshows and find the slides where the notes are for me to grade. Two, if a kid doesn't have access at home to the internet or to whatever, then they can't access their notes if they wanted to. I don't require them to do much, if any, homework, but if they want to study, things like that, they may not have access to them. And I also like now the physicalness of using, and I call it an ISN, but I don't follow all the ISN rules of looking at the HyperDoc and doing the same notes they do in the magic text boxes, but writing them in a notebook. So then they have that physical notebook that they can take home. And if they want to review, it's in the notebook. If they want to show their parents, they can show them. I also, now that everybody has Chromebooks in their classrooms, and I think about my own kids, I don't want kids to be on a screen all the time. I don't want my kids to go to school from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. and be on a screen. So how can I deliver this different? Now that I'm not the only one with a Chromebook set, when I was the only one with Chromebooks in the school, in my class, they could be on the whole period because the rest of the day that they weren't. But now that every single teacher has them, I try to be mindful with group work and one Chromebook per 2 kids or per groups and working like that. So that's kind of evolved my HyperDocs from being, hey, here's the HyperDoc, do all your work on that, and I'm going to check it. It's going to be all online, perfect, to I guess it's now a hybrid blended HyperDoc where it's online, they have access to it, and then they're taking notes in their ISNs. So that leads me to the podcasts, because one of the questions that you guys prompted me with is, how are you using HyperDocs since we've been doing distance learning? And I went, I'm not. And I went, yes, I am. And I had to rewind myself, and especially my wife's like, you can't say that. But I reminded myself before that, and that was that part of the long answer, is that I am using those same, the consumer HyperDocs. And so what I've done is I've taken those and I've used those for my podcast. So I'll put it up in WeVideo and I'll do my podcast and I'll do the lesson over that consumer HyperDoc, which has links to stuff. It's got extra information. It's got all sorts of stuff. And then along with the video that I made, the podcast video, then I'll include that HyperDoc so they can just watch the video if they want to, but if they want to go into the actual document, and a good one that I used is my Renaissance art study. It's got all sorts of cool extras to it that worked really well. So the kid could watch the video, and if they just wanted to watch the video, and I usually use Edpuzzle to have the kids answer the questions. So if they just want to watch the video, answer the questions, and take their notes, great. If they really like, for instance, Renaissance artwork, they can open up the slideshow and they can go to like the Google Institute. I put in tours of, I think I put them in there. I know I put them in the video, but tours of like the Sistine Chapel and different things like that the kids can extend if they want to extend their education on this. So that's how I'm really using them. And it was funny because at first I'm like, I'm not. And then I'm like, yes, I am. I'm making all my podcasts using those HyperDocs and then adding them into the assignment. So that's how I'm doing it right now.
It's amazing. I'm just pulling up your website now. And I have to be honest, like as I'm listening to you, Rocky, I hear you doing 2 things. I hear you kind of like thinking as a teacher and how you've evolved, right? Like all the ways that you've been able to bring growth to yourself and your own design and all these cool things. But then I also hear you kind of thinking about like, how do you manage that for the students? So like part of being a teacher is like, how am I doing things for myself? And then the other part is like, what does this look like on the student end? And I can hear in your reflection, like sometimes I just want my students to either learn how to manage themselves in all their classes, and I want them to understand that they need to have some de-screen time, and that's going to be in their blended learning, notebooks or ISM notebooks. And so I hear you kind of subconsciously also like teaching your kids how to learn and how to manage remote learning and all the extra stuff that we're navigating right now. So it's just cool. I
Yeah,
could just
sometimes I worry sometimes with some people that are new and doing some HyperDoc trainings that I've never seen. I've never seen any online program or anything. Well, I guess that's wrong. Maybe I have. The most effective teaching that I've seen is kind of the blended learning. It's not, here's a standalone thing, go on this math program, do this thing, and you'll learn everything there is to know about it.
right,
And same thing
right,
with HyperDocs. I sometimes I see people go, oh, I can do this and just assign this. And I was like, yeah, you could, but it's not going to be the most effective way. I mean, I would do it in a way that if you're going to have, and I know this is different, talking about the real life stuff now. If you're going to do that, maybe do it in stations. Maybe give them 15 minutes on their own and then 15 minutes with you. I mean, that's the best thing about HyperDocs is you can do that. You can have
yeah,
some on your own time, small group time, and teacher time. And can you fold that into what we're doing distance learning? Yeah, you can. I did not have a big success with Google Meets with middle schoolers. They were all very awkward and there wasn't very many people that showed up. But you could do that. I could take a HyperDoc and I could say, hey, group A, we're going to meet from 10 to 10:15 in group B. So I could do that remote learning. But that's the biggest struggle I've had in distance learning with middle schoolers is getting them on a Google Meet for any length of time. It's usually one kid's on there with me and we're like, hey, how you doing? Fine. What's going on? Nothing. And then one will pop on and pop off, and then the other one with no screen. And then so
I think you're describing what so many people are experiencing. And so that's it, right? Like this whole idea of like making changes as we go. Like, okay, that's not really working. So they're not really meeting me there. So I got to, in the Google Meet, I have to go meet them where they are. Um, and, like just finding what works and do more of
well, I
that,
think
and then adapt as you go and be okay and be open to that, I guess.
in my whole credential program, the only phrase, this is the thing that I think everybody needs to learn if they don't learn anything else. The only thing I really remember is monitor and adjust. Like that's the biggest as a teacher. You need to be willing to change things. You need to be willing to switch gears. You need to be willing to go, I worked really hard on this lesson and it sucks. And so I either need to tweak it or, you know what? Nice try. I'm going to get rid of it and throw it away. I mean, I've found myself, I'm sure every teacher's done this. They make this lesson, they think it's the best thing ever. They spent tons of time and then they get frustrated with their students because the students aren't engaged in that lesson. And it's really hard to go back and say, oh, and sometimes you might have that class and yes, the students can contribute, but you're the one in charge. And
Right.
so it's really hard sometimes to go, okay, I need to stop being mad at my students for this because that's kind of unfair. I'm the one who made the crappy lesson. So how can I fix it? Or maybe it just was a miss. Maybe I swung and missed. Maybe it's, you're not going to win every battle. You're not going to make the best lesson every single time, So that's the monitor and
Yes,
adjust.
yes, 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 yes. I think you are speaking to so many of us right now. I think that's really good advice for anyone who's new to HyperDocs. Just know that like part of it is trying something out. There could be a big flop. Don't give up. Adjust. Reach out to the community because we try so hard to support each other. But yeah, like there is no perfect. Just like there's no perfect curriculum. There's no perfect lesson. And I thank you for that because you're just kind of giving permission to fail, permission to try, permission to take risks, all that kind of stuff. So I think that during this time, we all were rushing to like be really good at this immediately. Like, I got to hurry up and figure out how to use all these new tools. I got to hurry up and figure out how to create HyperDocs and do distance learning the proper way and connect with all, it's really stressful. So I love that it's like, try this out, see how it goes. Try this out, see how that goes, and just adjust and
Yeah.
adapt.
And I mean, it really, again, I said this before, like
Yeah.
if you lost it, I know we all say, oh, I'm going to lose instruction. If you lost the day of instruction because your lesson wasn't great or didn't go the way you want, the world's not going to end. If it's every single lesson that's way, it's that way, that's kind of a problem, right? But I mean, there's John Crippo, one of the things that he said that sticks out in my mind is, why not do it today? Like, why not try it like right now? And that rung with me because I can't remember the first time I met him. It was something Templeton School District, and I'm notorious for not listening to keynote speakers. I just kind of zone out. I'm just bad that way. But Lisa and Alice or John, when they say that one thing, like, wait a minute, all right, now I should be paying attention. Because I would do this every year. And his point was, and I think he even said it this way, was, we all see these new things like in the spring and we want to try it. We want to do all this stuff and we want to do it, but I'm going to do it next year. So I'm not going to do it now because I've already started. I'm going to do it next year. Right. And then next year comes, and inevitably, as much planning as we want to do in the summer, we go, no, the beach is too nice today or whatever. So we're scrambling and we just do our normal routine. So to his point, why not in the spring just do it? I mean, what's going to happen? The school's not going to blow up. Your kids aren't going to forget everything you've already taught them. So why not try something new, do something different? Why not do it like tomorrow? When I first learned about HyperDocs, this is a funny story. It was when Lisa did her keynote at Arroyo Grande High School. And then that Sunday, that was on a Saturday, the Sunday I went home and redid a lesson. It was a lesson on Zheng Ha. And then I did it on Sunday. And I gave the lesson on Monday. But the funny part of the story was in the middle of class and the kids were working. I'm like, this is great. The kids are working on these things. I can walk around and meet with other kids, and so I get a text. And yes, I checked my text in class and my buddy says, hey, you're famous. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he'd sent me a picture because of Lisa in Pleasanton. I didn't even know he's a teacher in Pleasanton School District doing a presentation on HyperDocs. She was presenting the HyperDoc that I made on Sunday, shared with her. She shared it on Monday with the Pleasanton School District. I took a picture of my kids working on the same HyperDoc, sent it back to him as he was watching Lisa on Monday. So it was that's just kind of a funny how, why not just do it? And from there, it just, and again, I survey my students each semester. Mm-hmm. There are some classes that don't want you to just give them work. They want you to talk with them. They want to have discussions. This is another thing that I've learned is that when you use your HyperDocs, or when you do, even if it's not HyperDocs, if you're teaching a lesson, you can do your different classes differently. So if my first period won't be quiet to save their lives and they're just, sometimes I have them, hey, you got 15 minutes, start the lesson, and then we'll talk. And then third period loves to have discussions. So that one, maybe I do a lecture to start and maybe we have a big discussion. So I don't have to do, even though I teach the same subject 4 times a day, I don't have to do the lesson exactly the same those 4 times. I can mold it to the classes and their personalities.
Well, and I love that you're saying that because I want to share this tweet that was posted the other day. And this is a teacher who says, shares her name and she says, a big thank you to you, Rocky, on Twitter, because all of the stuff that you have shared is literally helping so many teachers. And what's nice about this is that basically teachers don't have to start from scratch. It's kind of overwhelming right now. And because you've already put your stuff out there and you're adjusting as you go, you can just kind of give it to someone else. They can remix it and then they can adjust as they go. And it's so cool. The girls popped in. We all were so excited when we saw that tweet you shared the other day, because that's exactly the spirit of Teachers Give Teachers. That's exactly the heart of this Facebook community. And that's really speaking to what you're doing is like, hey, I made this, I'm going to put it out there, take it, use it, toss it, whatever works for you. So we're so grateful that you've basically shared so much of your work, because you don't even realize how many teachers you've impacted, but how many students, because each teacher represents a huge chunk of students. So, you might teach in Napomo and that's your, population, but you've reached so many students through sharing your work publicly with teachers. So We're laughing because we try to keep these short, but we could just listen and listen and
Sorry,
listen.
are we supposed to be done? Because
That's
Yeah.
our cue.
You know what though? This is like that that tweet. We see that all the time about you, Rocky, and we hear that all the time. Like everyone knows who's this Rocky guy because it just saved me because I'm new to middle school history and I didn't even know where to start. And we have the pleasure of knowing you and being friends with you and hearing and talking with you, and you're just so honest and real about talking about teaching and learning and about kids and not the fluff and not the all of that. And so we get that privilege. So it's been so nice to share your voice in this group. So thank you for.
Thanks. Yeah, it's tough sometimes. I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with Twitter because there is a lot of. I really do not like the rock star teacher term. Like it just, to me, I don't know, whatever. Rock stars are usually not always the most desirable people in the first place. But you know, sometimes there's that persona there where it's like, if you just do this, this is going to work for you. And it's like, that's not the way school works. There's no good. Well, actually there is. Best teaching practices, good teaching is always going to work. It doesn't matter if you have Chromebooks or you don't or whatever. Those are always going to work, but there is no gimmick. There is no one thing. There is no magic button. There is nothing that is, there is no like one. And so that's part of the thing. Sometimes I see that on Twitter with the new thing or some new idea, or it's like, it's a good idea, but that doesn't, you know.
Yeah. Rocky, I would just say that you, in addition to that, it's that authenticity that you bring. So you know best practices, but your authentic personality. I mean, you shared with us about connecting with your students through Instagram. You shared with us your journey as being a dad and trying to find the balance with your own family of outside time and distance learning. And that's a really important perspective as an educator to have. And I'm sure that you weave that into your blended learning and instruction. And that's why you understand the value of putting your own design in this. And as I've shared your HyperDocs with people over the years, I feel a little guilty because I've gotten to see that aha moment, like right up face to face, where I'll say, hey, let me show you something. And then I open it up and the teacher's like, oh my God, you just gave me so much inspiration. But the other part of that is like, hey, he's another teacher. Just send him a little DM on Twitter or follow him too, because he'll have a conversation with you about lesson design. So that's something that you have brought not only to your classroom, that authenticity, but to our professional learning community of HyperDoc creators. You've totally brought that community too. So I just want to appreciate you for that.
Thanks.
I want to add on and say, oh, go for it. Go for it.
There was somebody else, I can't remember. She just shared with me, what's her name? Her handle's at CMMS_TechDiva. She just shared with me before she shared on Twitter how she redid one of my, I think it was my Galileo lesson, which is a Sheg lesson, but with other stuff put in there, and it's really cool. Like it is cool to see. I feel kind of bad sometimes because some of them I haven't been updating as much as I probably should, but then I see other people that have adapted what I've done, and I go, oh, I better get back to the drawing board and start doing stuff. But what she did was really cool, redesigning that lesson. I did see somebody the question that I want to answer it really quick because they asked about IMBs. I don't know if we have time for that.
Yeah.
But at our school, we use thinking maps for writing. So a lot of what we do in the IMB is setting up their writing with thinking maps, writing tools like one-sided multi-flow maps, things like that. I also have them write their vocabulary words in their ISNs, IMBs, whatever you want to call them. Again, I don't use them the way people tell you to use. I use them more as notebooks. And then I just have them take notes. So instead of using my magic text boxes where they would take notes on the slides, I now have them do them in their ISN. So then they're easier to find. If I did want to check them, I don't check notes. I was a horrible note taker and didn't learn until college that I should not take notes in class because all I did was draw things. So I don't check notes because I don't feel like I am a good enough note taker to check people's notes. But if you wanted to, it's much easier to check an ISN or an IMB than it is to go through slideshows and look through every little text box that's in there. So that's really how I use them. And I let my kids use notes on their tests. So the reward is the better notes you take and the more definitions you write down and the more things that you write down from class. Well, guess what? You get to use those during your tests. So they do get graded, I guess, to a certain extent. And I have kids that end up like during this distance learning, they're showing me, look, I took notes from the video. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
That's the transfer we're looking for, right?
Yeah.
Brilliant. You're just doing so much to like model like the behaviors you're looking for in your kids, right? Like I'm out hanging out, like balancing, working, and taking care of myself. You're just doing that so naturally that it's like modeling that for your kids, right? Or you're modeling like always adapting in life. We don't ever quite have it figured out. Watch me as I try something new. Or you're modeling like, you know, how to stay connected. You're just doing so much of that work, you know, that is going to transfer to the kids without even realizing it. So we're so lucky that you've been our friend for all these years, sharing your work, putting yourself out there, so open, real. We just really respect that about you. And we're grateful that you have a voice in this community, because I think a lot of teachers are really benefiting not only from your lessons, but also today from your words of or just your advice to like, you know, stay true to yourself and know that it's hard. And so we appreciate you so much for your time.
I add one little thing too. If anyone has ever seen me do the Happy Place HyperDoc, and I always pick the same place to model, Pismo, Avila, that's where he is. And I love to go there. I miss going there and hearing you play with your band out.
Well, I'm in Napomo, which is a little bit down the street from Avila.
Yeah, but you come down.
I love to live in Avila.
Band plays there, and I just I can't wait to get back to where we can connect and see you in person too, and have these great discussions together again. So thank you.
Hopefully in August.
I know.
Right. Well, thanks also for being so willing to put your work out there. Like people are already on your website right now, like shopping around. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rocky. It's been awesome.
Fun. Thanks.
Yeah, it's been really fun. We appreciate you.
All right. Good to see everybody.
Take care.
And yeah, if you have questions, just email. All right.
Absolutely. Bye.
Oh.